my beautiful plant people, how are we today? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the greenhouse. I know it has been a while. For those of you that have never met me before, I am Sam from Plant Collector Melbourne, and you're probably wondering, Sam, why are you wearing a white coat? And yes, my friends, it is my lab coat that I used to use while I was in science and in university. Represent. So for those of you that don't know, I actually studied science back in the day several years ago in university, and that is why I'm very excited to be showing you guys this video. It has been on my mind for quite some time, and so today's video we are doing plant anatomy. And you might be asking, Sam, why do I need to know plant anatomy? And the easiest way I can think of it is that plant anatomy is like learning a different language. Words that are unfamiliar become familiar to you. It will deepen your understanding of plants and also gives you the opportunity to continue on learning. So for example, when you come across these different words, whether that is through videos or through posts or literature that you are reading, it is easier for you to get a grasp and understand what is actually going on because you already have context and know these words. So let us deepen your plant knowledge and get to learning all about plant anatomy. You! So this is the very first episode that is about the science series. There are several purposes of why we are doing these series. One of them is because I think that it is time that I put science to good use from my head and to you guys. So my aim and purpose is so that I can make something that is as difficult and convoluted as science and break it down to something very easy to understand. And number two is, how can you apply this knowledge to your own plant journey? Because let's be honest, unless you can apply it, what is the point? So to give you some examples, we are going to be doing videos such as propagation, seeds, and identification. The more you know about plant anatomy, the better chance you have for understanding and gaining knowledge for plants. So to give you a bit of background, I studied science for about 4 years at Monash University, and there was a time when I thought it was such a waste of time, because here I am, an individual that loves plants and that is doing business. I should have done business, or I'm very creative. Maybe I should have done like an arts degree, visual arts, design, things like that. And yes, that was definitely past Sam's little story, but now I can see that we can absolutely put this to good use and share the knowledge that I have obtained through, yes, experience with plants over my own plant journey, but also through my Bachelor of Science with a different lens. So let us break this video up into 3 categories, and we're going to be talking about theoretically above the soil, theoretically below the soil, even if you do grow in leca and different media, and last but not least, the reproductive structures for the plant. So let us start with above the soil. So some of these words are going to be super easy to remember because they are very straightforward, and some of them are going to be a little bit harder. So in my attempt to help you remember these, we can do some little stories and I can show you visually of what they look like as well. So to make it a little bit easier for you guys, we are going to be putting down all the words down here. I also am going to be putting some words down in the link below, so that if you ever wonder how they are spelt, or if you want just like a bit of a memory jog, we are definitely going to put the words down there for your learning experience. So above the soil, we have, of course, the main stem, and I think that this one is the most easiest to remember because it is the main part, the central part of the plant. Next, in our common vernacular, we would say that this guy is a leaf, and of course that is correct, but if you wanted to be a little bit more scientific, and things might pop up in literature saying the leaf blade, so now you know better. It's not just a leaf, it's the leaf blade. Now when we are talking about the veins of the plant, these can always come contrastly or non-contrastly to the leaf blade itself. So here you can have the main vein, which is normally in the leaf, just right through the center, the biggest vein, of course. You can think of this as in a human body, of all of our veins, how we've got like really wider veins, like the main system veins, and then the peripherals and the smaller ones. And so the smaller ones, you can call them the secondary veins. We also like to say lateral veins, which is like more like horizontal veins of description. When we are talking about veins, you normally hear midrib when it comes to plants that have really distinct ribbing, like a philodendron tenue or an Anthurium veitchii, things that are very veiny and it's very obvious. Now, when we are talking about the leaf blade, and if you guys watch a lot of YouTubers when they are showing plants or explaining plants, you may come by the term abaxial. And abaxial actually means the underside of the leaf. And so while I was doing my research and remembering all of these beautiful anatomy terms, I remembered that there is of course the back, but there's also a anatomy term for the front. So we have abaxial, which is the back, think baxial, back, and then we have Adaxial, which is something that doesn't necessarily like come up too often in videos. I feel like a lot of people say abaxial and not adaxial a lot. So Adaxial is the front, and the way that you can remember the front is, oh, that's a nice front. So D-A, daxial. Baxial, back, daxial, that's a nice front. Hopefully that will help you remember. Now this guy, I feel like sometimes I even get this wrong when I'm talking about plants just willy-nilly and on YouTube, is that there is the petiole. Now people think that the petiole and the stem are the same thing, but in fact they are not, my friends. We know better. So we have the stem, which is the main stem that has majority of the weight, that is the main source of strength in the plant. But then we have the petioles, and the petioles are actually the ones that hold onto the leaf, and they attach themselves to the sinus or the leaf blade. So here is my beautiful Jose Bueno, and so let's do a little lookity look at the leaf blade. Gorgeous. And so you can see here that we actually have the main stem, which again is most of like the weight and structure for the plant, and then we have the petioles that actually connect to the leaf blade via the sinus, which is this spot right here, my friends. And the fun thing about the sinus, particularly when you start looking at like Anthurium, is that these can have different features. So when we are talking about identification of a plant, of course the leaf blade is incredibly important, but there are other things characteristically that are more important for identification, and one of them is definitely the petiole, and that the ridges, so depending on the number of ridges or the lack of ridges, can help identify a plant. So this could be that it has one ridge, that it has 2, 3, 4, 5. 3 is like tri, 5 is like pent, and there's different ways to describe those little ridges in the plant's petioles. Now, when we are talking about the sinus of the plant, there are a lot of descriptive ways of explaining it. So it could be an open sinus, which is what we've got right here. You can see here that there is an opening, and what we call these little ears or these little guys is what we call lobes of the plant, and that if they are not touching, that the sinus is open. And if we have something like a Forgetii, which unfortunately I do not have one with me at the moment, but hopefully I will find some footage, and that you can see that that one is a closed sinus. And of course there are some really beautiful examples of very wide sinus plants, things like Anthurium sanguineum, and hopefully if you can see this round velvet, Anthurium round velvet in the background, that it actually does in fact have quite a wide sinus. And so my friends, adding more to your toolbox and your dictionary is that something very important, which is called a node. You guys would have come across something that's called a node if you've looked up anything to do with propagation, because the structure of a node is incredibly important, particularly for propagating and cutting up your plants. So when you are cutting, you might hear that you need to cut below the node. The node is the section of the plant that has the most growth, and that is where all of the new growth can come. If you cut the plant, that is where the petioles and the leaves can come out and grow from. So without a node, there will be no growth. So Some things you can say that are close internodes and wider internodes. This one has quite close internodes. If you can see, all of these lines here are nodes, as well as here. Hold on, hopefully you guys cannot see me. So you can see here, wherever a petiole comes out from, that is actually where a node is. And this one is a little bit harder to identify the nodes, purely because they are very close together. The wider the nodes are apart, it is the easier to cut and see. What we call the in-between of the nodes is an internode. So a really good example is this Philodendron Pariso Verde that I have right next to me. And here you can see that we've got some nodes because it is attached to the petiole and the leaf, and that we've also got aerial roots. Aerial roots, unless it's like a Hoya or something, they will typically come out of the node. So right here is a node, we have a node right there, one over here as well where this hand is, and we can say that these nodes are very far apart, and so the gaps or the stem part that is between the nodes is called the internode. So think nodes, growth, internode, no growth, and it is between the nodes. So another one that is extremely fun to say is a cataphyll. And cataphyll can look a little bit different depending on the family in which you have. Cataphyll is used to describe like a mature feature of a plant. It only ever happens for like adult plants, which is this guy right here at the very end of the new plant. Any new leaf that hopefully you guys can see will typically have a sheath that is over the new leaf, and that sheath, this guy right here, is a cataphyll. I'm also going to tell you guys 3 different features about the leaf blade, and so you guys can put this into your toolkit, and so if you ever hear it, you'll have an idea of what they are. The first one is fenestrations. For those of you that are familiar with Monstera, you will probably have heard the term fenestrations, and fenestrations are these hole-like structures in plants and in their leaves, and as I said, majority of them do come from the family of Monstera. They actually create holes in the leaf blade so that they decrease the amount of surface area that is hitting wind, and wind can actually surpass and go through the leaf. It is great for thermodynamics and airflow, but also so that the leaf doesn't actually snap completely. So that is fenestrations for you. Number 2, and this one is so fun to say, and it is Geniculum. And I remember that I always would find these in a plant. I would always forget the name. So Geniculum can also be changed to Pulvinus, which is, I believe, I don't actually know, maybe Latin for like a knee-like structure. These are funny looking, very strong knee-like structures that are on the edge of the petiole that goes into the leaf blade. And these are knee-like structures because it actually adds flexibility to the leaf and the petiole so that it doesn't snap. So you can imagine your little knee like this going up, down, left, right, blah, 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 blah. And that is also to help the plant. It is an adaptation that the plant has created over time so that the leaf blade and the petiole have a little bit more stability and flexibility. If the wind or something lands on it, it is a strong like structure, and you can think of it as a little knee for the plant. And of course, if you guys have been on my channel before, you would absolutely know the word variegation. So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the term, but do you know what it actually is? Let me explain to you, my friends. So the difference between variegation and like a normal leaf is that a normal leaf that is green will have chlorophyll, and chlorophyll is a little structure in the plant that I like to think of it as the energy, the absorbing of light to create energy, and all plants need this to survive and utilize light. It is where photosynthesis happens in the plant. And so variegation actually does not have chlorophyll, or if it is, let's say, like a minty or like a yellow variegation, then it has lesser amount of chlorophyll. And so variegation typically in the wild would actually or highly likely die. It is the less superior genetics. It is a genetic mutation, abnormality that should not happen to the plant. It is something that has gone wrong in the genes, and therefore it is a weaker plant because it does not have chlorophyll to provide energy for the plant. So when people say, I like variegated plants, you guys actually have a mutation of a plant. And over time, I believe that us as a society have really loved variegated plants purely because of the aesthetic, the look of it. So we have like cultivated it, we have kept them, we have propagated them so that there is actually way more of them. But in the jungle, in the forests, in the rainforests, they actually normally die in nature. Now, let us talk about below the soil. We won't spend too much time here because there is not too much to say in my opinion, or to my knowledge anyway. So when we're talking about the anatomy of the plant and we're talking about its roots, and this one is very simple, but I find that it is not quite relevant, so that is why we're going to skim over it. So we have our primary roots, what I like to call secondary roots, but I don't think in like literature that is actually a scientific thing. We have our lateral roots, which normally are coming off the primary roots. We have our root hairs, our root tips, and our root caps. And so that is incredibly simple. I will put up a diagram for you guys to get a little gauge of what the differences are. The caps are very much like the tips of the plants, but just at the very end. And then you've also got the hairs, which are the little follicles that are coming off the lateral roots. But more importantly, how can this information be related to you guys and to your plant journey? So when we're talking about roots, I find it way more important to be talking about water roots, soil roots, or aerial roots. And what is the difference, Sam? And you might think that it is a very easy or understanding difference, which technically it is, because you have water roots that grow in water, you have soil roots that grow in soil or media in the ground, and lastly you have aerial roots, which is roots that are in the air. Super simple to remember in theory. There are many differences between all three roots, and depending on how you grow your plant, the roots of the plant will differ. So for example, did you realize that water roots are typically a lot more whiter than soil roots, or that aerial roots are a lot more tougher and have this like brown casing on the outside than the others? Yes, so when individuals talk about water roots, soil roots, and aerial roots, hopefully you guys will understand that there is a difference. I do briefly want to touch on these 4 words and to add them also into your toolkit to know that they are all different. To what degree, Sam is not very sure, but I will link a little link down below and on screen to hopefully give you guys an idea. These are structures within the soil, and these are typically with plants things like alocasia or caladiums, and that is corm, bulb, tubers, and rhizomes. And to be quite honest, I couldn't tell you the difference, but I do know botanists know the difference, and I know people that do know the difference, so I will link that down below. There is something to do with like structural differences and how they grow. I think rhizomes kind of grow horizontally, I should say, laterally horizontally. But yeah, Sam couldn't really tell you the differences, so that's why we're gonna link those. I am no guru, I am only a guide, my friends. So my friends, the next section is reproduction, reproductive structures, the birds and the bees. And for those of you that have ever wanted to create seeds or pollinate and reproduce plants in not a propagation way, which is creating clones, but in a creating seeds and viable offspring, then reproduction, the structures for reproduction are an important aspect for you to learn. As well as we are going to be doing a video on particularly anthurium reproduction, which can translate to many different genuses in the aroid family, with slight differences of course. So that structure in its full entity is called the inflorescence, or what other people like to call it as the inflow for short. And the inflorescence is a incredibly wild structure depending on the plant, like Anthurium or Philodendron or Alocasia. They do have quite some differences, but functionally they are all the same. So we have the inflow, we also have the Spadix. So the Spadix is the main structure that has all of what we call the flowers. So there is a misconception that this whole inflorescence is a flower, which is not correct, my friends. You know better now that the Spadix actually has hundreds and hundreds of different flowers, and that is where pollination occurs, it is where the stigma fluid comes out of, it is where the berries are produced. So the Spadix is the location in which lots of the reproductive shenanigans goes on. Next, we have the Spathe, and the Spathe is what actually encapsulates or covers the Spadix. It is for protection. It normally has different colors. It might even have different patterns. The Spathe is actually very important for identification. The next part is, I might butcher this, and my apologies if I do, but I believe it is pronounced Stipe. And the Stipe is actually I guess, the holder of the Spadix and the Spathe. I guess in my head, it's kind of similar to the Petiole. I will absolutely be doing another video on specifically Anthurium reproduction and creating seeds. But something to take note is that for Anthurium, they have what we call a unisex Spadix, which means that they both have male and female parts in one section, whereas other families or genuses have what we call like a bi, or like a chamber for the male and the chamber for the female, that they're not quite mixed together. The best way I can describe it is from this incredible book here, Aroids, and this is a older book about aroids by Denny Brown. It is a absolutely fabulous book. It is a historical, beautiful book that I'm very lucky to have, and I shall show you guys some of my favorite pages from here, which is this guy right here. And so you can see here that this is your typical Anthurium one, where it has unisex, it is both male and female, and here that you have different chambers or different male and female sections for the inflorescence. Yes, the bisexual flowers, we love that. Yep. And I love this book. This book, if you guys could ever get your hands on it, it is very, very difficult, but it does have this really awesome section about the shapes of leaves and inflorescent shapes. Highly, highly recommend. I might do another video on this guy right here as well, so that's awesome. Love this book. And so, my friends, that pretty much encapsulates a lot of the lingo or a lot of the words that we use for aroids and plants and botany that you can use in your everyday life, or hopefully try to slowly understand. So how can you apply this knowledge? Now that you have some words and you have a bit of idea of context, how can you apply this to your growth and your plant journey? And these words would definitely help with identification. If you have ever bought a plant and you were not too sure about its ID or its history, it is really great to be able to read some literature and figure out the characteristics of the plant. And in this literature, you will come up with all of these words that you may not be familiar with, but if you know these words that are in the video, it will definitely give you an idea. So if you're looking at the Spathe, if you come across literature and they say that the Spathe is a maroon color, then you would know that that is something that you'll be looking for once you have an inflorescence, that you can check the identification by going through old documents of IDing plants. It is a really great if you are trying to figure out whether something is a species or a hybrid. Of course, that you will only be able to find literature on species and trying to identify it that way. I've mentioned it before, but pollinating and producing seeds, if you know the difference and the structures of the inflorescence, it is so much easier to go online and figure out how to create seeds. And of course, propagation. If you guys are ever wanting to cut up some of your plants plants and wondering how to do it, knowing where there is growth, where there is not growth, and these different structures will definitely help when you're trying to propagate your plants. By knowing these words, you will hopefully be able to understand the plants, their anatomy, and also their function. So for example, once you know the words fenestration or geniculum, that hopefully you guys will try to know what their function is and also be able to give better care to your plants. So things with fenestrations probably want to climb as well as they want some really good airflow. So my friends, I hope this video gives you some insight into the science realm of plants to embed a deeper understanding into your plants and also give you the opportunity for deeper understanding and learning for your plants. So thank you guys so much for hanging with me in the greenhouse. If there are videos or things that you guys would love to understand, particularly of like a sciencey lens, please leave a comment down below. As I said, this is the very first video of the plant science series. Hopefully it was easy to understand, and now you can officially say that you have some more tools in your toolbox for understanding plants and the lingo. If you like this video, I will leave a video up here for you guys to watch. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye! Mwah.